What's up guys, this is Evan with Backwoods Adventure Mods. Today we're going to walk through the installation of our brand new DRIFTR series aluminum roof rack for the 5th gen Toyota 4Runner. We're going to be putting it on the Backwoods shop rig that you can see at shows later this year. This is a full length roof rack and it's a no drill installation. When you open the box you'll see the two long side pieces, the rear panel, the front fairing, these plastic blocks for installation, aluminum mounts, and then the aluminum extrusions that are the crossbars, as well as a hardware kit. It's all stainless with black oxide. And these slide nuts actually roll in from the top so you can add them after the fact for any accessories you want to add. First thing we're going to do is remove the OEM roof rails. We did have the crossbars, we removed them previously, but you'll have the opportunity to take those out after you pull the hardware, or you can just leave the whole thing assembled and lift it off all as one. The first thing you have to do is take off these plastic end caps, and they're just snapped in, but they're really in there. I don't recommend prying on the sides like you may see. You have a pretty good chance of putting a dent on the side of the roof here. So I use a trim tool or a screwdriver, and I like to pry from the inside, kind of where the track is. I'll pop it off the inside, then kind of roll it off the outside. So you can see there's two clips on each side. They're just really tight. Then it's a 13mm socket to take out the factory bolts. And you just do the same thing on the other three. With the original roof rack removed, the next step is to install the mounting blocks. First, you'll notice you have 4 that look like this and 2 that look like this. These 2 are for the very front. We don't want to use them now. They have a counterbore hole and it's drilled through the wider side. The ones that have the larger hole all the way through the narrow side are the ones we're going to use. So you'll see these little plastic, they look like a straw, that stick up through the roof. We're going to leave those there, and this is big enough to go around them. So we are going to silicone this so it's waterproof, but we're not going to do it right now. We're going to put it together dry so that we can do some adjustments. So it's this plastic block, the mount with the L shape facing outwards, and the new longer hardware that we include. So just install that kind of finger tight so it can still slide around. Same thing on the other 3. Next thing we're going to do are hang the long side pieces onto the mounts. And you'll notice there's only 2 lengths of bolts of the 1/4-20 that are black stainless. There's 1 inch and 1/2 inch, and we're going to use the longer ones. We're going to use the 1 inch for this part. Use a black washer on both sides, and then use your lock washer on the side with the nut. Now when you get this side piece, due to the fact that it's such a long piece, you might see a bow that's just inherent to the aluminum, but don't worry, it'll straighten out once you get everything adjusted and tightened down. So these slotted holes near the back and near the middle are going to be the ones that we use to put on the mounts. We have the side panels on, just kind of finger tight, just hanging in place. Next we're going to put on this rear panel. It uses the same 1 inch hardware. I'm not going to use a flat washer on the outside. I don't think it's necessary because the holes are cut just to the right size and they're not slotted. Of course, I'm going to use a flat washer and a lock washer on the inside. With the back panel in, we're going to start installing these extrusions, which are your crossbars. We're going to go ahead and put all 7 in. We send 8. One of them you can't see because it's installed behind the fairing, but we've got 7 more and we're going to use them all for this. If you have a sunroof, you might choose to leave that one out if you want, I don't know, to be able to crawl through your sunroof or whatever, but typically you'll probably want to use every single one of them because you're probably going to have a tent or some storage boxes or something. We have these pre-drilled holes roughly every foot, but you'll also notice there's slots, so if you have something in the way or for whatever reason you're not confined just to the holes here, you can use the slots all the way along. When you get the extrusions, they'll probably still have these carriage bolts in there. These are done at the powder coat level so that no powder coat gets into the threads. Just take them out and then discard them or use them for a different project. They're 1/4-20. All right, and I'm just going to work our way from the back to the front, and that'll kind of straighten everything out and give us a chance to get the alignment done. As with all of our 1/4-20 hardware, these are going to use a 5/32 hex key. Before we put the fairing on, we're going to go ahead and put this last extrusion on the back side of the fairing, mostly as a stiffener. It's so much easier to do it now than trying to do it up on the roof. So for this, we're going to use the 1/2 inch long, the shorter of the bolts. If you have a few extra, don't worry about it. We'll use the same hardware kit for some of our other DRIFTR racks. And then these slide nuts. We're going to go ahead and align them roughly with the holes in the fairing, so we can see them once we flip it over. Do that for all 8. Since these probably won't line up perfectly, a pick or a tiny screwdriver is a good tool to help you get them the rest of the way there. Try to make sure that the end of the extrusion is flush with the end of the panel. We sent you Loctite. We're going to use that, but not until we've got all these in. I want to make sure we have a chance to get them all started before we start tightening them down. I've got all 8 of these installed, not really tight, but just in place so that I feel good about it. I'm going to take them out one at a time and put some Loctite on each one. If anybody can tell me why the Loctite lid doesn't Loctite itself on forever, let me know. Next, I'm going to set the height, which we've already gone through and set the gap that we want under here. And it's best to look at it from 10 or 20 feet away. Once we have that tight, we're going to go ahead and crank down the bolts on both mounts. And we've already gone through and tightened down all the extrusions, which has pulled our roof rack nice and straight. Okay, we went ahead and put the Loctite on all 8 of these bolts, tightened them down, and now we're going to install this fairing. Definitely a 2-person job. It'll keep you from maybe dragging it across the front of your roof. The same 1-inch long bolts that we've been using for the rest of the extrusions. Okay, after installing this, I want to recommend that you don't tighten the last few of these down all the way. It'll make it a lot easier to get the fairing in if there's a little bit of gap there. If you have a light bar, it's a 40-inch single row, you can either install it with a roll-in T-nut into the front of this track, or you can drill your own hole and mount it in here. It's up to you. Now it's time to finish up the mounts. We've got the rack centered left to right, and you want to check it at the front and the back because the roof is tapered to get wider at the front. The rack's straight. So this is a process you want to do one side at a time. We're going to start on the passenger side. So the bolts on the other side we're going to leave in place to kind of hold its adjustment. And then I'm going to lift this side of the rack up so I can work with my sealant. I've got just a roll of rolled up cardboard here. You can use anything, just be careful not to scratch your paint. Then after I raise it up, we're going to seal around the mounting holes that go into the roof. And this applies to the rear and center mounts. The front mounts we haven't done yet, but they don't go into any cavity inside the van, so you don't need to seal it.
The van?
The 4Runner. Too much van stuff. So I'm going to run kind of like a figure 8 or 2 circles around these straw things that stick up. And after I squish that down over it, I'm going to put a little bit more in the holes so it seals up the threads. Or instead, you can put the sealant directly on the threads of the bolt. It's up to you. Okay, I decided to go ahead and put sealant in the bolt holes as well as the threads of the bolts. Don't worry about using too much. It's kind of this is a point where it's important to make sure it's sealed up, because the last thing you want is water dripping inside your rig. So I would personally rather clean up a mess with some extra sealant after we're done than I would have to go back, diagnose where the leak is, and try to repair it. So now I'm going to set it back down into place. Then we'll snug this side down and work fairly quickly on the other side. We just finished tightening down the middle and rear mounts that are sealed up now. Now we're going to do the front mounts. And they're a little bit different because they don't bolt into the roof, they rely on pressure. So we're going to bolt this plastic block down to this mount, and then we're going to install it. And then we're going to lift up on the front of the rack really hard to kind of preload almost the tension on this, and then when we take the pressure off of it after tightening down our mount, it'll have that much pressure applying downward to the roof. So these are the blocks with the counter bore. Put the bolt in from the counter bore side so the bolt head is recessed, and then bolt it to the bottom of the mount. So I'll do that, and then we'll install it on the rack. I installed the block with the flat washer, lock washer, then nut. It's the same 5/32 Allen key. And I'm going to install the block so that it's flush with the inner edge of the mount, because it installs like that. I'm going to loosely install this complete mount with the same hardware that we use for the middle and rear mounts. I am going to use the flat washers on the outside for these because it's a slotted hole. Then on the inside, flat washer, lock washer, nut. These are the ones that we don't want to tighten down yet. All right, the mounting blocks are installed. They're still loose as they attach to the side of the rack. So now, like I said a minute ago, we're going to lift up on this part as hard as possible and basically set a preload. So you're going to want something to keep you from scratching the roof, because we're going to wedge this under there. I'm going to use a screwdriver. You could use a wedge, a block of wood, anything that'll fit under here, but make sure to protect it so it doesn't scratch your paint. And we're going to use this Halloween dog towel. My shop towels are my wife's kitchen towels that got too dirty. Right. Okay, so wedge it in there as hard as you can to lift up on that. And then I'm going to tighten down these blocks. And you want to make sure the block is being pushed down as you tighten it. So when I take this out, all the pressure that was pushing up on that is now being applied to the roof. We'll do the same thing on the other side. That's got it buttoned up. Just to recap, this is our 5th Gen 4Runner aluminum DRIFTR series rack. To begin, we took off the factory rack, we put on the rear and center mounts, hung the side panels, then we worked our way from back to front with the rear panel and extrusions. We did the fairing, then we got it all adjusted, sealed up the rear and center mounts one side at a time, and then we did the front mounts. Guys, stay tuned. We've got more 4Runner stuff coming, like our highlight series front bumper, grill guard that we're working on, and skid plate. If you have any more questions or any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us at backwoodsadventuremods.com.